Just kidding, I'm not dead. It is time for part 1.2 of 2 of the Indo-Persian weapon series. So let's talk about some more small arms. Hilson. Next up, we have two for the price of one. Two. These are Indian push daggers known as Qatar. Now, I'll show you this one first. This is the one I got first. A friend of mine in high school named Justin, rest his soul, he died some years ago. He's the first one I knew who had any swords and got me into sword collecting. And he had a Qatar. I was fascinated by the thing. It's probably what got me into my interest in Indo-Persian weapons in the first place. Well, partly. And, you know, European weapons tend to be what I'm most fascinated by. But I've always been fascinated by Indo-Persian weapons, especially since so many of them are highly decorated in a very, and not overly gaudy way like some weapons get, but very interesting. And although there are a lot of Indian weapons that are very unusual, and I look at them and go, what were they thinking? And this seems ridiculous. A lot of them are very practical and straightforward. Although, maybe not as practical as I think. For the Qatar, it's also wood, is a push dagger. Now I've sharpened this. Oh, I forgot to show you the other one's being sharpened. I have to go back to that. The Qatar is sharpened, as you can see, but it's mainly for pushing and punching through mail. But as practical as I think this is as an anti-armor weapon, one has to wonder, why did it only develop in India? If this was really as useful as a regular dagger, maybe it would have been more widespread. That's my kind of opinion of weapons. If you see a design that basically exists in several cultures, although slight variants to it, it's probably a good design. If it exists in just a few places, it's probably an okay design, but not really great. And then if it doesn't exist at all, it probably isn't a good design for actual combat. Like a lot of fantasy swords we don't see in history anywhere, and there's probably a reason for that. As far as these, as far as I know, only the large daggers like this we see in India, in Indo-Persian areas. We see the small, push daggers sometimes in the American West, what we might call push knife, or you sometimes see those, but you don't see these widespread, and that's probably because, if you slash with one, that's going to torque your wrist. That part here is meant to guard the wrist from cuts, but it could jab in. They're kind of tricky to carry, as when in a scabbard, that whole part's sticking out. It's longer than my hand. It's definitely longer than most dagger hilts, so, maybe it's not the most practical. Let me go back real quick and show you some of the cutting capacities of, say, the Jambidia. I've got another piece of paper. And I did both sides of this. Well, I didn't do a good cut there, but you can see it did cut. And that, kind of tore that. I need to buy a new notebook. All my paper has gotten rather humidly wet and curled at the edges. It's hard to cut into, but there you see, that's pretty clean. So it is sharp, I promise. The paper is just not good for cutting. And back to the kukri. Despite the fact, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, it comes very wide. You see it's very thick at the spine for a blade this size, and it just has kind of a bevel at the last bit. And even so, it is quite sharp. Of course, I can't do this angle right here. Let me try it this way. Aha, there we go. Still very sharp, even though it's that thick. So it has tremendous cutting power. Like I said, it has a lot of weight behind it, so it just wants to carry through whatever you hit it with, which is part of why it cuts so well. Partly, it's the angle and such. But secondly, we have this one. I saved this one for last on the 2 Qatar because it's much fancier in, although this is probably steel and done in that faux antique brass look. Has a much fancier decorated grip, and ooh, look at that. Has the flame blade. Now this flame blade we know is a modern one done by Windlass, not only because that's who we bought it from, but also if you look carefully, I don't know if it'll show on camera, if you look when you turn it, what they did was just take a straight blade and take a belt grinder of some sort and just grind these in, because these are not, if you'd actually forge the flames in, the edge would be consistently thick. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but it's actually only thin enough to put an edge on at the tips of the flames. These parts are noticeably thicker because, like I said, they just took a sander out the shape of this from a actual straight blade. I got this at a discount, though, at the sale, because if you look down, you might be able to see the blade is slightly off center. It goes slightly off to one side, but let's see. Yeah, there you can see. Slightly off. If you look from here up, the ridge. It's just a little bit off. Not hardly noticeable, but you can see with the decorative piece there that this has space here and this doesn't, and it doesn't quite line up with the ridge there perfectly. But I think I paid like $30, maybe $35 for that. So again, a wood core, which pretty impressive on these Indo-Persian ones that windlass and stuff. I think, let's see, all of those I think are windlass, except the Jambija. I don't know who made it, but I got it at the museum replica sale, so it's probably windlass or related too. Now, to my last Indo-Persian small arms. I don't know which one to show you first. Let's go with the small chakram. Sometimes called a quoit, as I understand. I almost bought a bigger one the year I bought this one that was about, maybe this wide. This one I got for $3. They wanted $10 for the other one. I didn't think to haggle with them on the price, but so I only got the one. But this size, they would sometimes wear on their wrists. Maybe a little small. This is a little small. Well, a little big. My wrist is small. But you could hold it as long as you don't get that edge too sharp and don't get it on your palm. Now, I don't know how sharp they would have had these before throwing them. It's fairly weighty. It's solid steel, and you can see it's got some mass through here. So even unsharp, it would certainly, if it hit someone in the face or nose or do some damage. But you wouldn't have to have much of an edge. But if you cupped it where the edge isn't really touching like that, you could slash with it like a knife or punch with it. There's a video on YouTube that Mike Lodes did in his series Weapon Masters, where he talks of these, and he talks to a guy in India that shows all his techniques and how they could, with them on their wrist, a little bit smaller than this, like if someone grabbed them, they could manipulate and get the chakram into the wrist with their wrist and various other things, or take them off like this and cut the throat, or be able to throw them, like I said, punch with them, slash with them, of this size. The bigger ones, of course, have different uses. You see sometimes where they'll twirl them on their finger in the shows and fling them, which apparently was a technique, because unlike throwing it this way, if you're packed in with people and everybody's jostling around and stuff, doing this, it's hard to do. On your finger, apparently easier to do. I'm not going to do it inside because I only have my cell phone camera I'm using, and this thing could break a lot of stuff in my room. So we're not throwing. This one I haven't sharpened though, because I'm not very good at sharpening on that much of a curve. Like slight curves I can do pretty well sharpening. Something like that I'm not great at, and I do everything by hand with a file, so it would take a while. And so far I haven't really thought that I need this sharp, because if I'm going to do target throwing with it, I'm probably going to throw it into styrofoam anyway, and the edge it has will do fine to stop it. So, and embed it in the styrofoam enough to stop it. But that's it. I don't know how this one was made or how they're traditionally made particularly, but it does have, if you see on one side, it's flat and then angles off, and the other side is just flat. And I think that is to kind of like those aerobie disc type frisbee things. It's to help stabilize it in flight by reducing, I don't know the whole physics of it, but when you throw a disc, they tend to flip to one side because it generates more lift on one side than the other somehow. But somehow that's supposed to help alleviate it somewhat so it flies straighter. Moving on. Last is this one, and I will have to look up and put the name of this double-sided knife, dagger, on the screen. It's something with an H, and I don't know how to pronounce it. It's H-I-J something, yeah. But this thing kind of scares me. I've never sharpened it. The edge on it from factory is fairly sharp. I mean, like right here, it's just about sharp enough to cut with, and I've never tried to really touch it up. But traditionally, they did usually have the bends in it. Now, sometimes you'll see one with a third blade up this way where they could punch with it also. The reason I said this thing makes me nervous is because if you're thrusting with a knife, if someone jams back, that second blade potentially could go into you, which would suck. I don't know. I don't even know how they use these things. Maybe a cross twirly kind of pattern thing to cut. I have no idea. I just thought it was neat. And again, I picked this one up at a Windlass. I keep saying Windlass. Museum Replicas clearance sale. Windlass owns Museum Replicas. They used to not. That's why I have the difference of saying it that way. But it has these metal kind of rondelle-ish guards there, and nice wooden shape to the handle. I have a crack here you might be able to see, and a little bit of a, where is it? Right there, a little chunk out of the handle. One of my friends that I used to hang out with, his younger cousin wanted to throw it one day, and I said, okay, go ahead. I figured it would stick. Well, I don't know if they're traditionally made with one solid tang and two blades on it, but this one actually has tangs to about here, and it's two separate knives attached by these pins, which is fine for most things, but for throwing, it wasn't so. It actually, broke, and I put it back together. So, but I think I paid $5 for it at the sale. I don't remember how much they sold in the catalog for. I also don't know if when you're cutting, you'd cut this way, like certain Indian daggers slope down, or maybe this way where it's sloped up. But I have the feeling it might be downward, because I've seen more Indian daggers with that kind of a downward curve to them. Anyway, and that is my collection of Indo-Persian small arms. I'm wearing hot pink, and my hair in a kind of a Who style, like as in the Who's from Whoville. That's mostly just to make sure people made it to the end of the video, because if you don't, you won't see the pink shirt and you won't comment about it. But if you do, you will, and then I'll prove you watched the whole thing. Bonus. Hilson, and I'll try to get up part 2 tomorrow on the swords. The Indo-Persian swords. Till then, good night.